Hey guys, Jason Sensational here, and coming to you today with a pretty special deck that I had a lot of fun with, both creating and playing, and also having a good amount of success with it on Masters. And I believe I peaked somewhere around rank 30 something with this deck, and so I was definitely surprised by how well the deck seemed to perform when it was based off of a kind of weird combo that I had in mind. So if you do enjoy seeing more content and creative decks like these, please do give the channel a like and a subscribe, and it goes a long way for me. And so without further ado, let's just jump right in. So let's just quickly run over the basic overview of the kind of cards and components that go into this deck. So the first thing that you'll see is that I've paired Zoe with both PNZ and Vi, which sometimes is a really strange combination that most people probably don't really think about when they're looking to put Zoe into a deck. But I think that Zoe with P and Z works really well in some aspects. You'll see that we do have a good amount of early game and really cheap cards that we can play out to help Zoe level up really quickly. Those being some 1 mana spells within P and Z, such as both Rummage and Jury Rig, that we can play at burst speed to help progress Zoe really quickly. With the addition of the PNZ discard tools, we also have cards to discard with Spacey Sketcher that give us a little bit of a board presence. And the rest of the deck is kind of composed of minions with really good keywords, such as Sparklefly, giving that elusive and lifesteal, and Crescent Guardians, which can actually be used pretty aggressively, but also give us that Overwhelm keyword. And at the top end, we have a copy of Subpercival, which is a really good elusive body. And what's also really good about PNZ with Zoe is the card Suit Up. It's such an incredibly strong buff card that a lot of regions don't actually have access to a similar card like that. We can make the comparison to like a Pale Cascade that might do the same thing, but it only lasts that one turn. And so Suit Up is definitely a lot more flexible in this kind of deck and helps us protect Zoe even better. And at the very top end, we also do have 2-star shapings, which has been a pretty staple within most hard-on decks to provide that big, elusive, or overwhelm unit that can help us finish games. And we also have 2 copies of Give It All in this deck, which has really exceeded my expectations. I think a lot of decks don't really have the tools to deal with a card like Give It All very well, apart from the likes of Deny or Ruination, which Ruination doesn't really see much play, surprisingly, in my experience on ladder right now. So let's also talk a little bit more about the win conditions of this deck. When simply just by looking at the deck list, it's kind of hard to think about how exactly you want to be piloting this deck. But I think a really important frame of mind to think about is that this is primarily a Zoe deck over anything else. We do have the additional tools such as Giddy Sparkologist as well as Suit Up to really protect Zoe and to ensure that Zoe is able to level up. With a Zoe leveled up, we can obviously outvalue our opponent by generating more celestial cards, as well as giving our board a lot of uninteractable keywords that the opponent really has a hard time dealing with. And this can allow us to cheese games with like a really wide, elusive board. Now, if that doesn't work out, because a lot of decks are able to kill Zoe, we do have a second win condition that kind of goes hand in hand. While we work towards the first win condition, we're able to generate a pretty wide board state with the likes of Spacey Sketcher discarding our Jury Rigs or our Flame Choppers, as well as playing our cheap Celestial cards that we get from Super Cool Star Chart. We're able to go really wide on board, and if they're able to kill Zoe, we're able to drop down cards like Vi or Subpercival, and then play Give It All and grant our board really high stats to allow us to win the game over the next 1 or 2 attack turns. And so I think that these two win conditions are kind of synergistic, and something that I realized is that a card like Give It All is strong for the same reasons that Zoe is strong, is because we're able to give units keywords that they don't normally have, such as Vi being able to get elusive or overwhelm, for example. And that can be really strong in closing out games, especially when the opponent doesn't have the tools to interact with the combo. Let's go into each of the win conditions a little bit more into detail. I think that if you guys have been playing other Zoe decks, it's pretty standard and similar in how you can play for a Zoe level up within this deck. Zoe not only generates super cool star charts, we also have the likes of Spacey Sketcher to act as another way to generate from the pool of less than 3 cost celestial cards. In addition, we can get the tools such as Moonglow or use Giddy Sparkologist to grant Zoe an early spell shield that makes it really hard for the opponent to interact with. We also have some pretty good P&Z tools such as Rummage and Jury Rig to also help us turbo level Zoe up a little bit more. And of course, one thing that I mentioned earlier that PNZ crucially provides for a Zoe deck is the card Suit Up. Being able to buff Zoe to a 4/4 on turn 2 or even turn 3, depending on when you draw into Suit Up, is a really, really powerful way for uh, you to keep Zoe alive because so many regions lack a clean way to deal 4 damage to Zoe. And even if they can, you have the likes of a Sunblessed Vigor or Pale Cascades to push it over the top. Now, what also makes this deck really flexible is that Suit Up can also has really good targets such as Flame Chompers and the 1/2 elusive Lifesteal Butterfly that can be really used to kind of win any aggressive or burn related deck. And so because Suit Up has so many flexible targets in this deck, you're really able to use it when you need to and on the correct minion that you need to, depending on the matchup. But let's also talk a little bit more about the Give It All win condition, which is kind of like a more backup if you need it. This is kind of like the really strong late game. You go wide with your elusives or your cheap minions, and you get a bunch of really, really powerful keywords. So if you have a Sparkle Fly down with like a Crescent Guardian and then a fully buffed up Vi, you suddenly get a board full of 10 attack minions with elusive, challenger, tough, and overwhelm that your opponent really has no way of stopping it unless they run cards like Ruination. Even 1 or 2 hushes doesn't necessarily destroy your game plan depending on how wide of a board you're able to achieve. And of course, we do have the typical target card Star Shaping to help us get those big elusives or spell shield overwhelm units that can also help our units survive after we play Give It All, because a board full of spell shield units is really hard to deal with for our opponent. Lastly, I do want to make the comparison of this Give It Zoe deck to some of the more popular Zoe decks that you might see on ladder, those being Zoe Lee, Zoe Karma, and Zoe Asol, which typically runs Demacia and Plaza. So compared to Zoe Lee, there's a lot less reliance on a single finisher. In some games where you don't draw Lee Sin into Zenith Blade, you don't necessarily have the win condition, and it's just a matter of time until you draw it. And so this kind of reliance on Lee Sin as a win condition isn't as prevalent when you have a lot more tools, such as either going wide with elusives, or having Give It All as a reliable finisher. The only kind of downside to this is that Lee Sin has a lot more ways to keep its combo intact. So if they play Zenith Blade onto their Lee Sin, they also have tools such as Notify and Deny to keep their Lee Sin alive. And so if you compare it to Give It All, they can either hush your Vi on the turn you play Give It All, and so that really diminishes the power level of the spell, or they can pick off some of the weaker units that you've used to go wide with, and Give It All doesn't have the same impact when there's fewer units on board. In the mirror, when you play Zoe Give It All versus Zoe Lee, you'll find that Lee Sin has also a slightly faster win condition, and so that in that particular matchup, you'll find that the Zoe Lee Sin deck will probably win the majority of the time, maybe 7 out of 10 times, I would say. But compared to Zoe Karma, I think that Zoe Vi Give It All, whatever name that I haven't decided on giving to this deck, is that we have a lot more interactability with our opponent's side of the board. Zoe Karma plays a lot more for either a controlly late game potential or to try to level up Zoe. But I think that our deck is able to level up Zoe a little bit better because we do have Suit Up very importantly, but we also have the potential to interact with the opponent's board a lot better, which is something that Zoe Karma really lacks. With the tools like Flame Chomper and paired with Suit Up, we're able to get 4 or bigger challengers to really pick off enemy units to control the game in the mid game before we play our Give It All. And so I think that against Zoe Karma, I think our deck is favored, probably at least 6 or 7 out of 10 times. And then finally, against the Zoe Asol, our deck does have a much faster curve and early aggression. So getting down a really cheap elusive minion with a Suit Up early on is able to generate a lot of pressure to the opponent. And sometimes we're able to race down Zoe Asol decks in a weird way with pretty strong elusives and mid-range tools. The only downside here is that, of course, we have a lot less late game value. Not only do we run one less copy of Star Shaping, not only we also don't have access to a lot of their invoke tools such as Mountain Scryers, Solari Priestesses, and of course Asol as a late game finisher. I think that this game is a lot more even depending on if they're able to um, draw into their Grand Plaza. But I think that because Zoe Asol also lacks a lot of interactability, mainly only running cards like Single Combat and Hush, if we're able to pull off an early Give It All with a Vi on board, I think that they have a really hard time dealing with it because their early games also compose of a lot of cheap and low statted minions. And so I think that this matchup is even to slightly in favored, so it's at least a 4-6 or 5-5 in my opinion. You might have different experiences in these matchups, but this is kind of how I felt when I've been playing this deck against some of the other Zoe decks on ladder. And finally, I do have quite a few games to showcase with this deck. It's a whole lot of fun to play with, and I do have some really cool highlights I'd like to show you guys, just to see how the deck kind of performs with both of its win conditions, and of course against different decks with differing levels of interactability. I think that Zoe Give It All is a really strong deck that really punishes decks that really don't have good ways of interacting with your board. And so I have a bunch of cool games to show you guys, and I hope you guys really enjoyed the guide, the deck, and the games that I'm about to show you guys. So with that being said, I thank you guys for watching this far, and I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope that you found this video entertaining and informative. So I'll leave it there, and I'll catch you guys next time. So our first matchup here is against Fiora Shen, which is probably a little bit of a harder matchup simply because they do have a lot of tools to kill off our minions. Specifically, they have the likes of Single Combat, Concerted Strike, and even Sharp Sight to block our elusives. And so we do have the Zoe in starting hand, which is really good. I think that it's kind of hard to level up Zoe in this matchup, particularly because they do have their challengers and single combats and whatnot, but we'll try our best to here. They pass So far, it seems that they don't have an early game much, so it's whether or not they have Fiora here, and they don't, which is really good for us because now that they don't have a challenger on board to really deal with this Zoe. So with this super cool star chart, I'm just looking for a minion that can contest with this River Shaper, and I think that the Charger is the play here. Moon Glow's a little early, especially when this have 3 mana to single combat into my Zoe. I don't think that that's a risk I can take. But they actually pass here. And because I have this spacey schedule, I can actually go a lot more wide with this board. But this does mean that I'm tapping under 2 mana, and so if they do have the single combat, they have the single combat. But I think that this Serpent allows me to challenge the River Shaper on the following turn while also guaranteeing me the fact that they can't Sharp Sight into my Zoe. And so I think that getting the Challenger here is really important just to ensure that our Zoe is able to strike the enemy Nexus again. And they actually did have the Sharp Sight here, which I could either Pale or Hush, but I think that Pale not drawing me a card is kind of bad. And so I think I offer the Hush here. This also denies them a spell draw with their River Shaper. And it seems that they don't have the likes of single combat in hand. So now they drop Shen. And, you know, I have 3 mana. There's no real point to play anything here. It's just good to be a little bit more flexible with my mana. And so they finally drop their Screeching Dragon, which is really good for me because this means that they're at 1 spell mana and I have the whole turn to do whatever I want. Crescent Strike here is really interesting, but I think that ultimately Moonglow is the better card here because I do have Zoe's Sleepy Trouble to stun the Challenger here. And then while they're tapped under any mana to deal with my Zoe, I get to the opportunity to cast Moonglow onto my Zoe, and this means that it's extra hard for them to deal with my Zoe. And so this means that it's a lot easier for me to get the level up. Also really cool is that this Fleeting Paddle Star also acts as a good card for me to discard with my Spacey Sketcher. And of course I take Moon Silver here because it's the only card choice from that pool that I haven't played yet for Zoe. And now I'm actually really close to leveling up Zoe. I think I'm 7 out of 10 here. And so I am going to try to level up Zoe at burst speed without giving my opponent any chance here. And so I actually don't, I'm not going to play Crescent Guardian first because of that order. I want Crescent Guardian to be my 10th card to level up Zoe so that I don't give my opponent any actions to interact with my Zoe. And here I'm just making sure that I haven't played Guiding Touch at all this game to ensure that this Crescent Guardian is able to level up my Zoe, which it does, which is really good here. And another amazing thing that you'll see is this Flame Chomper's draw from the Guiding Touch. With a leveled up Zoe, this can be really insane because now the opponent's tapped under and he doesn't expect me to grant all these minions Challenger. And so these PNZ tools really serve as a really cool way to not only be discard fodder for your cards, but this Flame Chomper just surprises our opponent and we're able to get really favorable trades here. And so he can either choose to Sharp Sight to protect one of his 2 units here, but Shen or the 5/4 Challenger is dying this turn. And because we have the Challenger, this also means that Zoe is guaranteed to strike the Nexus this turn. And this crucially gives us more value that this hand really needed. And what do we get? Bam! Living Legends. Insane pickup here because of course we're really low on cards and that pickup was really good. And so our hand here is, I think we are looking to play Living Legends on the following turn, meaning that we need to bank 2 spell mana going in. And so I think this turn I probably just use Star Shaping. We can't really protect the Zoe here, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it doesn't really matter now that Zoe is leveled up. So we just have to let this go through, and we play Star Shaping, and that's pretty much all we have mana for. And what we're looking for here is probably another big elusive, and Great Beyond fills in that gap really nicely. Because they have really few tools to deal with elusives. They can only really use sharp sight. Elusives are really good in this matchup against Fiora Shen. And this Zoe pickup's also really good because it allows us to grant our whole board elusive again afterward. And I think what's really cool about this Living Legends is we're particularly looking for those cheap minions to go wide on the board, because with our Zoe we're able to grant them some really strong keywords. And by kind of slow playing these cheap minions, it also kind of forces our opponent to think about how they want to spend this mana, and if they spend too much mana, we kind of get the edge over them in a sense. And I'm really liking this this pull from the Living Legends, being able to go cheap really well, and these celestial cards do also have some really good keywords. We're able to grant our entire board overwhelm with the charger as well as the Crescent Guardian, and then we have the challenger follow-up with the serpent. And now that I'm at 2 mana, he's thinking, oh, what can he really play, right, to punish us? And then I drop the serpent, and this means that I get to challenge his whole board again really favorably. And so this is a really strong situation where Zoe's level up really comes in handy. He takes a single combat, whatever. We're not really that, we don't really care about this. This actually doesn't really do anything. It doesn't protect his unit from the challengers, but I guess it does reduce a little bit more damage. And we drop the Zoe here. The Zoe's obviously not that impactful because our board's kind of small. But of course, just being able to chip in with a little bit more damage turn after turn means that, you know, he gets less health. Obviously, that's how the game works. Now, I actually should have pulled in both units, I think, so that our Zoe could strike again for the Celestial card. And we were kind of susceptible to another sharp sight there. But I think that because our opponent's at such low health total already, and we have a lot of big elusives coming in, I think that will ultimately kind of fine here. He drops Bright Steel, which is a little bit scary, but we do have the option to play our Creep Beyond, which gives our board Spell Shield, and of course it coming with Spell Shield itself means that he is going to have a really hard time removing it, and we're just going to chump out this 9/9 just for a little bit of health. Now I do have the open attack lethal on board, but if he somehow is able to kill my Great Beyond with like concerted strike single combat combo, I definitely kind of want to play around that. And him being down 2 sharp sights means that he's going to have a really hard time blocking any of my elusives. And so I think that just guaranteeing that even if he is able to kill my Great Beyond there, I do have the backup elusives with the Pale to finish off that game. And so a really strong showcase of the PNZ combos, being able to level up Zoe as well as granting our board challenger in a really crucial turn that he didn't expect it. Now, our second matchup here is against Taum Raka, and this is one of the matchups that I think that this deck can really punish because they particularly lack good ways of interacting with our board. And so this is also another matchup in which not only can we level up Zoe, we can reliably play Give It All. And so I see that we have Vi and Give It All in hand, and I think that you can even keep these in the mulligan against this matchup. And of course, Giddy Sparkologist on turn 3 allows us to give our Zoe Spell Shield to even increase the likelihood of it surviving even more. And so this is a really good hand to have in the mulligan, especially in this matchup. And of course we play Zoe on turn 1, and there's not much they can do against it. The only way that they can really kill Zoe is that if they do have their Boxtopus on turn 2, but that also means that they're trading their Boxtopus for our Zoe, and we don't even need Zoe in this game plan after that. And so even if they did do that, I'd be pretty happy. And of course, this Sunblessed Vigor gives us that additional survivability. I think that Equinox is always a good card here, just simply being able to deny their challengers early on. And it's also a really cheap card to help us level up Zoe even faster. I think that we didn't need the elusive unit because we can already go wide on board. And he plays Boxtopus here. What's really cool is that we do have a Sunblessed figure, which means that his Boxtopus alone cannot deal with the Zoe. And if he double hushes here, it's kind of the same story. He trades the Boxtopus for Zoe, and we have already progressed our game plan far enough. Seeing this Astral Protection come out is really bizarre because it means that his hand is pretty stranded, because if he had a Taum Kench, I think that it was likely he would have used it on that, or even if he had a Guiding Touch or anything like that. So the Sunblessed figure actually allows us to keep our Zoe alive, and I think that this is a good opportunity to use that Equinox. Of course, he could bash in the Equinox, so I just pass over to him. And after he plays the Star Spring, I use the Equinox. Not only deny him the heal from the Star Spring, but of course he loses the Challenger from the Boxtopus. And again, we're in another situation where if I could attack. Of course, I can't really play around a double hush, but with this hand, I don't think it's very important whether or not Zoe survives, and so it's kind of an interesting spot. I think that it's definitely safer to not attack with the Zoe, but I think I ultimately end up doing so. Moon Silver or the Messenger are really good pools here. I'm not quite sure what I'd pick, but I think that it's the Messenger, just to be a little bit more flexible with my mana. And so I go in for the Zoe attack here. So, unfortunately, he does have the first Hush to clear the Spell Shield, and the second Hush to kill my Zoe. But again, we have our backup game plan that he has no way of interacting with. And of course, if I didn't attack with this Zoe, I'd probably be just in a win more state. So it's a little hard to say. It was definitely a misplay to attack with our Zoe here, but meaning that forcing out a double hush on that turn means he has no way of hushing our Vi, or well, he has very low probability of him hushing our Vi when we play Give It All. And so I opt to play the Crescent Guardian there just to plan out my mana a little bit more. I have 7 mana this turn, and I'll have 8 mana next turn, assuming I spend all 6 of my mana. And so this is a really good opportunity to play Vi to set up or Give It All for the next turn. Him having the open attack means that he didn't have any more challengers to push onto this board, and so I'm really happy to see him take that open attack overall. And this is a really good setup for our Give It All the following turn, which is really scary for him. Again, his hand's also kind of in a bricked out state, which has been working in our favor, which is also a good thing, I suppose. I think that he plays... No, he doesn't. Okay, so now this is a pretty clear Give It All. If we drew into a Rummage, we could have gotten an extra minion on board, which would have been really cool. But again, his deck has no way of stopping this Give It All, and this is actually insane. We get 30 power on board with the Give It All in conjunction with the Vi, and they all have Challenger and Overwhelm, which not only means that I'm pretty much threatening lethal here, I am able to clear off all of his board so that he can't even progress his Star Spring any further. And so I think that in this matchup again, we are really, really favored either to win by leveling up Zoe, or if we have a Give It All in hand, this is another really, really powerful way to go. And we just drag in everything here, and we're threatening exact lethal, which is really insane. The Vi with the Overwhelm keyword and Give It All. And so this Guiding Touch actually lets him survive at 1, but of course this means that we're setting him on a 2-turn clock, and so if he doesn't kill us next turn, or have a way to deal with our board, then he's gonna lose, and he's already played 2 Hushes, so it seems very unlikely he has a good way of answering our next attack. Broadback Protector heals him a little bit more. Star Shepherd gives another minion, but of course all of our minions have Overwhelm, so that these minions don't really do anything. And of course, we get another Zoe. And so if we needed to, you know, win with just a big big elusive attack, we also have that option. Oh wait, what am I saying? Zoe's not leveled up. I'm sorry, I played Give It On, I just assumed that my Zoe's leveled up. But of course we have the next action. He has 2 cards in hand, and his Taum came down way too late to really do anything. So we have a really good open attack. There's no real point to play anything. I don't think he has any way of stopping our next attack, but I also think he has no way of punishing us this turn for just completely tapping out of mana. And I don't even think I have... Well, I have just enough mana to play Great Beyond here, but this open attack should just be lethal. And we have Hush plus Pale Cascade to push 2 extra damage, or to Hush some unit if we really need to. And so again, we just challenge everything here, and minus 27. Actually insane. He has no answer here, and the attacks just go through, and just really cleaned up our opponent here. I guess Taum's Raka just has 0 interactability outside of Taum Kench, and maybe a Shakedown if they play it. So if you're able to stick some really early minions and follow it up with a Zoe level up or a Give It All, this is a really good matchup. So now we have our Lee Zoe matchup, which is one of the harder matchups with this deck, simply because their combo is a lot faster than ours, and if we don't have a way to kill their Lee Sin, it's pretty much a guaranteed loss for us. So we're either looking for like a Hush to really deny their Lee Sin, and hopefully we can pull off our combo uninterrupted. And I think that early Zoe for them is never really that big of an issue for us, because we have really good ways to interact with it. So I take these passes here. I want to take a moment to talk about the mulligan. I kept Rummage with Flame Choppers for somewhat of exactly this reason, and that was I could get into a suit up, and so that I could deny an early Zoe or Mountain Goat. And now we have a 4-1 and a 1-1 on board, and this represents a lot of pressure. And one way that we are able to win this matchup is by just overwhelming our opponent on board, because they don't really have many early units, and we actually take this second Rummage here really aggressively to activate the Nightfall on our Crescent Guardian. And we have such an overwhelming board advantage that even if their Lee Sin comes down on 5, it's just really scary for the opponent because they can only remove 1 unit per attack. And so this is one of the rare instances where this deck is able to edge out over Lee Zoe, because we do have the opportunity to get early suit up and be able to apply a lot of pressure early on. So now we're dealing like to what, 6, 10, 11 damage this swing, and that's absolutely insane. And you know, we have the flexibility of this star chart to either get us like a Crescent Strike, or like an Equinox, or even a Moonglow that could be useful here. Now this is really important. We do actually have the Hush here, so we see what we can get first. I don't think this choice matters too much. It's a little hard to say. But I don't commit this Moonglow first because I do want to have my mana up to Hush and Pale if I need to. And so depending on what he pulls here, I want to use my Moonglow after combat, because I don't think he can get away with not pulling anything with the Lee Sin here. Otherwise, I just challenge Lee Sin with my Flame Chomper, and he's going to have a really bad time. Another thing is, when you're able to apply a lot of early pressure against the Lee Sin deck, when they have 0 mana, that's when you can really punish them for their plays, like this one. We have the ability to Hush and Pale Cascade to not only kill the Lee Sin, but protect our Crescent Guardian for the following attack. And by doing so, he has no way to interact with our board, and meaning we have the free open attack. So a really rare instance, we're able to pressure out our Lee Sin opponent here by keeping them on their toes. And finally, we do have our Zoe Asol Demacia Plaza deck thing. And like I mentioned earlier, this is kind of a 50-50 or even slightly unfavored. But of course, we do have the ability to apply earlier curve, and so we can pressure out the opponent or deal a lot of chip damage early on that hopefully you can close out in the later game with a lot of mid-range beef. Unfortunately, they do have their turn 2 Mountain Goat, which our deck kind of doesn't really have a good answer to. But luckily we do draw this Zoe. And we do have our, whatchamacallit, it's our Suit Up in hand. And when he taps under his 2 mana for Hush, we can go in with our Zoe's Suit Up to start dealing 4 damage a turn with our Elusive. And of course, being on his side, if he plays a minion, he could play the 4 cost Solari Sunforger here, yeah. So we're looking to get a Crescent Strike hopefully off of this, but even if we get a Moonglow, that actually doesn't protect us. So we do find the Crescent Strike. We also get the Equinox, which kind of serves like a similar purpose this turn, but just being able to deny him another gem from this attack is pretty good. Sorry about that. So again, I don't think there's any reason to... We definitely can't play Vi, because otherwise we tap under any mana, and if he hushes here, we still have to apply pressure, but he only has a single combat, which is really good because his Sunblessed Vigor allows us to survive, and also kill his unit through the exchange. And this means that not only do we know he doesn't have Pale Cascade or Hush in hand, we also burned a single combat from him, which is one of the only interactable cards he has within his deck. So this is a really, really good spot to be in. And of course, we want to keep 5 mana up here in case we want to start shaping our Zoe. And we take the Messenger here because our hand is looking a little bit awkward. Again, we don't really want to develop any units into his challenger to get any free attacks, and we'll just use the star shaping with the rest of our mana in attempts to keep this Zoe alive. Again, Immortal Fire is really good just as a big elusive unit, which he can't really interact with unless he gets an Obliterate or another elusive from his own. And so he actually burns Concerted Strike here. So what this Zoe has done, even though we aren't able to level up our Zoe here, is that he's burnt a lot of his interactive resources into trying to kill the Zoe. He spent a single combat, he spent a Concerted Strike, and now we're able to kind of develop our side of the board with a lot less worry that he's able to deny us of our trades. And what he's also doing, which I think is a kind of a rookie mistake to make, is that he's crucially tapping under any mana to bluff his position. I already know he doesn't have a Hush or a Pale Cascade in hand, but in case he top decked it, I think he definitely would have wanted to keep 2 mana up. And this actually allows me to take a pretty aggressive attack to not only level up my vibe, but sneak in a Zoe hit for my star chart. Second Zoe is decent, but I don't think we're ever leveling up Zoe here. We don't have any more suit ups, and he has Plaza down, so he can just challenge anything he wants. And now that he's played 2 Solari Priestesses, we do have to be a little bit worried about what kind of hand range and Obliterate cards he has access to. But on the bright side here, this is kind of interesting because I think that he's most likely going to challenge my units, so I can afford to play a little bit reactively if I want to. But I think just jamming down this Phoenix thing is good enough, and we'll just let him trade down our units. We do have a second Vi in hand, and because Vi leveled up, we're a lot less worried about trading off our Vi here. And I think it is kind of likely that he does have an obliterate in hand, but because we drew this suit up, I think I'm inclined to develop into this Vi Zoe suit up play. And if he does obliterate my Immortal Phoenix or whatever it's called, then it's not the end of the world here. And the only issue is, of course, if he has a second obliterate card, but either he chooses not to play it here, or anything else, but we get a really good trade here. I think that because he represented no Hush or Pale or anything like that earlier, I want to take in these free attacks with a Vi to deal 5 damage, and keep my Vi alive in case I can get another attack off with it. I think that even if Vi doesn't have Overwhelm, it's still very cool and to see that, you know, Vi is still a really strong mid-range card that can really apply a lot of pressure if Vi gets even 1 or 2 attacks in as a leveled form. And of course, the star chart giving us the second crescent is really important here in being able to not only deny him a challenger, but also the lifesteal that comes with it. And, you know, he still has a Celestial card, so he gets a Star Scamp out. And I think that he's able to develop enough to still threaten our trades here. So you got a Traveler off of the second Solari. So you know he doesn't have another Obliterate in hand, it's just whatever he got off of the Sun or off of the Traveler. And of course, he's kind of forced into challenging here, so he can play a little bit more reactively into what's going on. We can't save Zoe here, but we can actually save Vi with this Guiding Touch. And because we know he wasn't on a pale hand or anything like that, it's really hard for him to kill Vi here. And so he gets punished again for not playing around that combo. And you know, we're representing lethal with our Vi attack as well as a Submersible. And okay, never mind. He gets the obliterate off of that. Kind of interesting. He obliterates the 5/5, so I'm kind of scared into this open attack because if he is able to kill off my Vi, then it's I might actually lose. But this Rummage is really clutch in giving me not only the burst speed to Flame Chomper, but I also draw into a suit up, which means that if he is able to stop this Vi attack or this attack in general, I gotta add an additional 3 damage over the top. And so he had the Star Shaping to stop the Vi, or at least cancel out the Vi, but because I had that suit up and Rummage to kind of back up my Vi attack, I was able to clinch the lethal here.